Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about checkpoints. And a lot of platforming games have like midway points in a level, or maybe a place where you could kind of say, hey, this is where I'm going to start off if I end up dying further ahead, or whatever you kind of want to set up. But checkpoints are part of games, and we're going to cover how we actually make one. And so we're going to do something very simple just to show how this is possible, and then you can integrate this throughout your own platforming game. So a couple of things we need to make sure we do is we get a sprite. I'm going to just go ahead and go through these pretty quickly. We're going to add a character, give it a color, and I'm going to shrink this down for now. And then I'm going to add the behavior itself of scroll to and platforming. All right, there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sprite. Normally I'll just do a platform sprite, but I'm just going to call this the ground for now, because what this is going to be is kind of pretend this is grass or something like that, okay? So, or the ground per se. We'll consider something. So we're going to do this right here, and maybe we just do this just so it's very apparent what's going on here, okay? So we're gonna add a behavior and add a solid. And now I'm gonna add another sprite, and I'm gonna call it death, because we need to simulate death. So we're just gonna make this red, and red. There we go. And we're just gonna do this here. It looks like lava or something like that, right? So there we go, something like that. And what we're just gonna do is we're gonna make it where if you touch the death, you end up dying, okay? And normally we just create a respawn point, call it good. However, in this one, what we're gonna do is create checkpoints, all right? So let's go ahead and click here. I'm gonna make 3 of them. So I'm gonna call this checkpoint 1, and I'm gonna make it over here. And let's make all checkpoints this color right here. So we're just gonna shrink this down. So I'm just gonna put checkpoint 1 here, and then I'm gonna double click, go to sprite, do checkpoint 2. I'm gonna make checkpoint 2 right here. I'm gonna use the same color just so it makes sense. Except I'm gonna just copy this size just to make my life a little bit faster. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're gonna do checkpoint 3. Checkpoint 3. Do that towards here. Same color and same size. There we go. All right, checkpoints 1, 2, and 3. I'm gonna leave them visible in the game, but you can make them invisible once you're done. And so what we're gonna do is have our character go here, and what we'll do is we'll make it where, actually we should probably just do this. Let's make this a little bit easier for us to test. So I'm gonna make it where this is the section for checkpoint 1. And there we go, copy pasted it, made this for 2, and make this for 3. And instead, we're just gonna make this here. And notice how like you kind of have it where this one here isn't necessarily layered properly. It's just because I made the lava second, and then I made these 2. So these were on top. So if you click on the one that's kind of folded beneath it, if you wanted it to show up like these 2, you could right click and you could look at the Z order, and you could move it if you wanted to, or send it to the top of the layer. Or you could open the Z bar order, and you could see where in this one, ground is underneath death. And if you move it up, see how that popped up? This is something that is only available in the paid version, okay? So it's cool to be able to do something that quick. And now if I fall in between all this, I will die, okay? And so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our triggers that tell us, hey, we touch checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, checkpoint 3, all right? So let's go ahead and do that now. So we're just gonna call this checkpoint trigger. And I'm just gonna keep this right in the middle, well, maybe right off to the side a little bit. And we're just gonna make all the triggers this bluish. Well, actually, sorry, that's the same color as that dark blue. Let's do that. There we go. I'm just gonna do something like this. So it could be wherever you want. Just gonna slightly move it over just so then it's visually there. All right, and the problem is we need to call this checkpoint trigger 1. Okay, and then we could add checkpoint trigger 2 and do the same thing here. And we're gonna shrink this down and kind of make this here. Now this repetition here, there are ways that we can kind of clean up this, but I believe this is the best way to kind of get going at the beginning. That way you understand what's happening. And then once you have a better idea of what your systems are doing and so forth, you could kind of change it up accordingly, okay? So we got this. So all I care about is checkpoint 1 triggers checkpoint 1, 2, and 3. All right, so now the logic is if I hit play, if I touch the blue and then die, I will respawn here. If I touch this one, I'll die in the middle. I mean, not die in the middle, but respawn in the middle. And the last one, okay? So now we get to go and do all the coding that's required for us to set up checkpoints. So let's go back to event sheet 1. And in here, what we're gonna do is, let's get death set up first. So if character is going to collide with another object of death, done. All right, that's the condition we're gonna check, okay? In order for us to understand how the checkpoints and so forth will work, what we need to do is add a global variable called checkpoints, because we want to keep track of our checkpoints. All right, we're gonna default it to 0. And then what we're gonna do is make it where anytime I touch a trigger, it's gonna change the checkpoint's value. So let's go ahead and build those out first. So go to event, add event, character collides with checkpoint trigger 1, hit done. And what we're gonna do is add an action, go to system, in global variables, we're going to set the value of checkpoints to 1. So we're gonna do that for 2 and 3. So we're gonna do checkpoints on collision with, character on collision with checkpoint trigger 2. Go to system, set value, checkpoints will equal 2. And then we do that one more time. Character on collision with another object, checkpoint trigger 3. We hit done, go here, do system, set value to 3. There we go, oops. So now we have those 3. So now that we have that set up, we can now have our death actually work the way we want it to work. So normally before you would just say, hey, if you collide on death, go to respawn point. In this case, we have multiple options. So what we need to figure out is, okay, what to have happen. So what we need to do is, before we add an action, we want to click to the left where it highlights the entire block, right click, and we're going to add another sub event. So we're going to click sub event, and what we're going to do is check for what value our global variable is. So we're going to click on compare variable, and we're going to check to see if checkpoints equals 1. Hit done. All right, well, if it equals 1, then we know we want our character to have its position set to checkpoint trigger 1. And we do that, hit done. All right, so now we just rinse and repeat this all the way down. So I'm just gonna do a copy and paste it 2 more times, and then do, okay, well, if it equals 2 here, if it equals 3 here, it's gonna equal checkpoint trigger 2 and checkpoint trigger 3. There we go. All right, so now if we hit play, we should be able to make it where if I touch this one and die, hey, I showed up here. Now if I touch this and go backwards and die, hey, I'm in the second one. And if I go here and then die, I'm here. So now we have it working with all our triggers. So what we did here was we just did 3 if statements to check if it's 1, 2, or 3. And you can have an else in here because we do start with 0. So if we go back to our layout, if there was a way for this character to jump over this invisible trigger that you'll make invisible, then you need to make sure you take that into account and so forth. So there are ways to kind of just always have a checkpoint set in your game. You can just make this the entire length of the game, right? I mean, you're not going to see it once you click on initial visibility equal to false, right? So then you can make it where there's no way it won't get triggered, right? So it's really up to how you decide you want your game to be on how you trigger these things, right? Because what if I did right here was select all these items, change initial visibility to false, hit play. Oh, whoops, that only did those pieces. So let's do this one here, and this one here as well. This is how your game's gonna look like, right? You don't have any visual idea of where you're gonna get placed, right? So it just kind of shows you how checkpoints can get triggered based on what you're trying to do in your game. So just to review, we took our simple death respawn, but we now added a global variable called checkpoints that keeps track of which checkpoint I am going to respawn at. And what we did was we made it where we did a check on 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And that's where I actually respawn. In order for the values to change though, you got to create the triggers. If you don't have the triggers, you're not necessarily going to be able to control much for some of this stuff, okay? So that's kind of how you make checkpoints in a relatively easy way for your platforming game. And that concludes this video. See you next time.